I'm going to make it happen. And I think it's those words, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to figure it out. It's just, when you just really dial into that, you do it. And that's every time I came back to that. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to do it. And I always did.
Welcome to Season 2 of the Amani Experience Podcast. In this podcast, you will experience wisdom, advice, and stories from creatives all over the world. Your host is the award-winning Amani Roberts, who is a DJ, music producer, professor, voracious book reader, and a skilled chef. On the show, we love to share the stories of creative professionals, especially people who have gone from the corporate life to the creative life. Once again, welcome to Season 2 of the Amani Experience Podcast.
Welcome to episode 72 of the Amani Experience Podcast. For this episode, we have Chris Wise with us. 3 things that I really enjoyed about this episode. Chris has a very interesting story. He goes through much of it during the interview, so it was really interesting to hear him talk about how his life has evolved throughout the years. Also really enjoyed his attitude about making it happen, very inspiring. And then just his commitment to self-care is very timely, so I enjoyed his thoughts and discussion on that as well. If you want to reach me, email me, podcast@amaniexperience.com. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on the platform of your choice. I appreciate you listening, and to the show we go. At the age of 12, our guest today started his first business. At the age of 19, he purchased his first piece of real estate and was a millionaire by the age of 21. He has co-authored 3 books with top business leaders such as Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar. In his 25-plus years of business experience, he has built and sold 2 successful companies. In 2012, he sold almost all of his physical possessions, minimized his life down to 2 suitcases to begin traveling the world while running 3 virtual companies. In 2013, our guest faced his most challenging adventure to date, prison. Through facing his greatest fears and loving himself so deeply, he discovered a space within that has the ability to encompass all emotions, a space that arises out of the heart, where he began to feel safe enough to feel all that was arising in every moment. Currently, our guest runs 2 organizations, Wise Profits and the Evolved Alpha. Wise Profits helps companies put in organizational infrastructure so that they can scale. The Evolved Alpha helps successful men step into a new paradigm of achievement through embracing vulnerability. I would like to welcome Chris Wise to the Amani Experience Podcast.
Awesome. Thank you. It's great to be here.
It is great to have you here. We always do a geographical check-in when we check with our guests. So where are we right now?
We're in Marina del Rey, California.
Yes, sir. And where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Maryland, in a little town called Lanham, which is right outside of College Park. Yeah. So I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland, so I can relate. 301.
That's 301. You see it on the computer here, so 301. So yes, we're all part of the DMV, so it's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I love it when I talk to people who are from the hometown. Even Seiko was the same way. So yeah, definitely.
That's right.
How were you able to become a millionaire at such a young age?
You know, I was driven I was so driven. 12 years old, I started my first company.
Yeah.
And it was sharpening chainsaw chains. And, you know, I was born in a middle-class American family. We didn't have a lot of money. And so when I wanted something, I was told we can't afford it. And so I was like, how can I have it? How can I, whatever I can do to figure out what I want? And I remember at the age of 13, there was this $300 radio or the stereo system that I wanted. And I remember saving up $30 every week over a period of 10 weeks from this little job I had on the weekends to hit that goal. And so it was kind of like my first big goal as a young teenager. And started my first computer company at 16. That eventually led to the value of my company and the amount of sales that we were doing to become a millionaire by the age of 21.
Okay, and then as you shared with me offline, you've become a millionaire, lost one, become one again. Kind of walk us through what happened with that.
Yeah, I think entrepreneurship, for me, entrepreneurship is a lifetime journey. And for those of you that are either thinking about becoming an entrepreneur or already an entrepreneur, and perhaps haven't had your first success or going through a valley, like this mindset of what I'm about to share with you is so key. And it's just that I just kept going. It's just like no matter what came my way. So that first failure, so the market changed with my computer company, and then like we lost all sales, and then I was just like, I can't compete. Like they were selling things online cheaper than what I could get them for. And so the whole value of my business was lost. And then I shifted into a service-based company. Now that service-based company I was eventually able to sell later in my mid-20s. And then from there I transitioned into real estate and private equity, and then had built up another $1 million of net worth through my real estate holdings and other investments that I had done in. But then in 2008, 2007, 2008, when the market crashed, I was highly leveraged, and I found myself from having, $1 million net worth with decent cash flow to like almost negative $1 million, at least that's what it felt like, with like struggling cash flow. And that was the second time that I had lost everything. But I was like, I'm gonna make it. Like there's been several points in my life where it came up, where the thought came up, should I go find a job? And I just always came back to no. No! Like, I'm going to figure out how to do it. I'm going to figure out how to make it happen without going to work for somebody else. And I think it's that determination. It's that mindset for an entrepreneur, especially when, once you get your business rolling and cranking and everything's happening, like, those questions don't pop up. But when you're hitting roadblocks, whether it's from life's roadblocks or whether it's from business failures or own whatever internal roadblocks, those questions come up of like, is this the right path for me? And I think for an entrepreneur that's really committed, to a business owner that's really committed to doing it, you just always got to come back to yes. And I think there's something I've recognized inside of myself. Whenever I even had this other question, we'll talk about the third time in a moment, and how I, even outside of prison, I was coming back, should I go get a job? It always came back to no, like I'm going to make it happen. And I think it's those words, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to figure it out. It's just, when you just really dial into that, you do it. And that's every time I came back to that. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to do it. And I always did.
Right. And then the third time?
So the third time had built up. So I was running 3 successful, amazing companies.
Right.
And I can go into the story of how I ended up in prison. But so running these 3 amazing companies, and then I find myself, didn't even know it was going to happen, wasn't trying to do anything illegal, but I found myself in prison and couldn't get out. And 19 months I was in there, and then coming out of that. And there's a whole journey that I went through in that, but then coming out of prison and being like, now, hey, I got to recreate, start all over again. And a big thing, so I got out of prison in 2015, and a really big thing for me in all of this was redoing this from a place of self-care and self-love. And that was probably one of the biggest transitions from all of these things that I've gone through. It's like now that I'm recreating my life from a very different place than I had before. But one of the things that I had to overcome was just having this done a third time. Like, fuck, like, is this going to keep happening? Like, it was just so, being completely knocked down, basically back to zero for a third time. It's so hard, but I think that also just goes to the human spirit, to the entrepreneurial spirit. No, you just this is the approach I'm taking, treating myself so kind and loving through this. And I think that's one of the biggest differences, because in the past, when those failures happened, I beat myself up, or I pushed myself hard to get back on top because it was so uncomfortable.
Right.
But when I was in prison was the most uncomfortable experience that I couldn't escape from, that I had ever been through. And one of the biggest transitions is I actually got okay with being uncomfortable. I got okay with not having my way. And there's a great freedom and peace that I found in being okay, not getting my way, and not being comfortable. And so then coming back out and being like, okay, hey, now I'm going to recreate my life. Not forcing things, I think, is another really big transition point that's occurring now in my life, and saying, hey, is it okay if I go into a lesson right
Yes,
now?
go ahead.
So a huge lesson that came from me when I was in prison was there's nothing I have to do. See, as an entrepreneur, all the way in the past, I felt like I got to do, like I had this big goals and big dreams and all these things I wanted to accomplish, and I felt like I had to do stuff. And in a certain way, I actually felt controlled by my own goals and my own dreams. And I would accomplish one thing, and it was like, I'm not there yet, I got to keep going. And there was no rest for the weary. And yes, I had a great and amazing life, but I felt like I had to keep pushing and moving forward, the next and the next and the next, and it was never done. In fact, there was personal development stuff that I listened to that says, you're never done. You never quit, Winston Churchill. And so I bought into all these things, but because I was so attached to my goals and my dreams, and I felt like I had to have it, I was like on this hamster wheel of achievement. And I just kept going and going and going, and it was exhausting. And when prison happened, I actually knew, because one of the whole big themes of my life was I want freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And I had created a massive amount of freedom, but I wasn't free from this internal drive that was driving me to create all this freedom. And when prison happened, I actually knew, I was like, this is why I'm here. I'm here to become free from this internal drive, this internal mechanism that keeps, that's taking away all my internal freedom. And so in prison, making the transition and saying, and really kind of going back to ground zero on an internal level, and saying that as I come back out of prison and rebuild my life, it's all going to be done from a place of being kind and loving towards myself.
Great. Okay. Good. Now, if you wanted to summarize yourself where you are right now in 30 seconds or less, how would you summarize yourself?
At peace, satisfied, fulfilled, massive vision of where I'm headed. There's this infinite depth of surrender that I have, this infinite depth of surrender I can feel inside of myself. And out of that depth of surrender arises my masculine purpose.
Okay. All right. Good. Now, I consider you a creative professional. I'm a creative professional. What do you feel is important for creative professionals such as yourself or myself to succeed in today's business environment?
Creative professional. So I think one of the most, so I would just say being clear about where you're headed, what you want to create, surrounding yourself with mentors, peers,
yes,
good networking groups,
yes,
getting a clear plan of how you're going to get there, and taking consistent action. But there's something I would say that's even more. So that's the normal plan. You read every book kind of has that formula, and I'm
right.
saying it again because that's what it is. But I would say what I've discovered in my own journey that makes it all worth it, as opposed to something that you feel controlled by or that you have to do, like, because you can feel controlled by your own passion, you can feel controlled by your own creativity. So how do you create life from the most freest and peaceful and loving perspective? Because that's a question that has an answer, where you can create the very same thing, the vision that you have of what you want to create for your business, but you can do it from a place of being kind and loving towards yourself. And so I would say if there's the number one thing, right? Of course, there's all those tactics and strategies and all that stuff that you got to have that.
yes.
But what I would say comes first is starting from a place of self-care and self-love.
I agree. Nice. Okay. You've had a storied career. You've done lots of different jobs, lots of different careers, companies. What would you consider to be the turning point in your career year to date so far?
I mean, I've had a lot of turning points, but I would say the most significant turning point has been prison.
Okay. And tell us why. And tell us, well, you can go into the story about why you went to prison and what did you learn from that?
Yeah. So it was August 7th, 2013. And at the time I was living in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico with my beautiful Colombian girlfriend. And we had this I was running 3 companies, and we had this 6-month world tour planned out. And we were going to be, from Puerto Vallarta, we're going to be flying into Los Angeles. And so as the plane is landing in Los Angeles and taxiing on the tarmac, all of a sudden the plane stops Now, we're not at the gate.
Right.
And over the loudspeaker, I hear, this is your captain speaking. Welcome to Los Angeles. We're going to be stopped here momentarily as customs visa come on board. And I'm like, I'm on my phone. I'm so excited to be back in the United States, doing a message on Facebook. And I look up and I see this big black guy walking down the aisle. And he stops next to my chair. And he goes, Christopher Wise? And I look up and I'm like, yeah. And he goes, you're under arrest. And he stands me up, handcuffs me, and walks me off the plane. Now, in my mind, I'm like, why is this happening? Like, what did I do? What could I, like, they got to have the wrong Christopher Wise. Because I'm like, what? I couldn't imagine what I had done. And they're like, no, we have the right Christopher Wise. And then they hand me off to the Secret Service. And now I'm like, the Secret Service? That's crazy. Like, that's who handles security for the president. Like, tell me what I'm being charged with. Finally, they mentioned two names. And I recognized these two names to be two people who 4 years before, in 2009, had helped me get a loan for my business. I had hired them. Now, as I was going through the loan process, I realized they were doing a couple of shady things. But I didn't think I could get in trouble because I thought, man, I did 6 months due diligence on these guys. I have a contract. I talked with other people. They successfully gotten funded. They have a website. Like, it seemed to be a legit business.
Right.
Now I'm realizing they're not doing everything's on the up and up. But, like, how can I get in trouble? It's not me. And I'm going to use the money for legal purposes. I'm going to pay the money back. But that was my mistake because there's laws, conspiracy laws. And this is a great business lesson for all of you listening. There's laws that say if you benefit from the crime of another, that you are liable, and depending on the circumstances, you could go to prison. And it also doesn't matter if you're not aware of those laws. You're still responsible for knowing all the millions of laws that exist. And that's what landed me 19 months in prison.
All right. And then what would you say were the top two learnings that you experienced and went through in prison?
Yeah. I'd say one of the biggest ones is that I don't have to be treated fairly to be okay. I'm going to say that again because this is a powerful one, because I know everyone listening, I'm sure, has had an experience of not being treated fairly or justly. And in the past, when I got treated unfairly or unjustly, I fought. Like, this is not right. Ah! But in prison and through this whole situation, like, I didn't have, if I would have the $100,000 to fight the case, I would have fought that thing for sure. But I didn't. Mm-hmm. So I found myself in a situation where I was out of control. Like, I was going through this process, this judicial process in prison, where I didn't feel like I was being treated fairly. And so internally, as opposed to like getting angry and like going in the reverse direction, I surrendered into it. And I said, I'm going to love myself through this. And the insight that I got from that was that, and I found a place of peace in me being treated unfairly. And that's where that insight came from. I don't have to be treated fairly to be okay. Now, I will say that you still, like, if you find yourself in those situations, of course you want to take the most conscious actions and move towards justice. Like, that's what love does. Love wants what's right and just. Love defends. Love protects. And so, of course, you're going to take the most conscious actions. But how internally, are you fighting it? Are you angry? Are you out of peace? Because you don't have to be. You can be at peace in the most. I discovered an internal place of peace in one of the most unsafe and violent environments I had ever been in.
All right. And the second lesson?
I'd say that it's really the power of surrender.
Okay.
Because prior to all of this, I was so masculine, so driven, so drive. I'm going to make shit happen. Boom, boom, boom. And it was all about control. Because I saw that in order for me to create the type of life that I wanted in the businesses, I have to control. I got to control people and circumstances and contracts and outcomes and all these things. And when I found myself in an environment where I actually had no control, I couldn't leave. I was told I had to be locked down 12 hours a day, what to wear, when to eat. Like losing all my freedoms, my life outside falling apart, the only way that I saw through this in a sane way was to surrender into it. My intuition, the very first night, my intuition told me, surrender and let go into this process. And for a man in particular, surrender is a scary thing.
Very true.
But what enabled me to surrender and let go into this process was this I love you practice. And this I love you practice is actually, out of all the stuff I learned and I can share with you at some point today, is the most powerful thing I've ever learned in terms of any spiritual or personal development practice. But this I love you practice helped me feel safe to surrender and let go.
Very good. Very good. Now, where you are today, why do you love what you do?
You know, I've always had a mission and a vision in my life. And, you know, there was actually a period as I was going through all of this where I lost that. In fact, there was a period of time where I surrendered into letting go of having a mission and a vision. And that was actually very powerful. But through the letting go of my mission and vision and purpose and all that stuff I had held on so tightly before, I said, I'm going to allow my purpose to emerge naturally, to not force it to come forward. And so as I did that, what has emerged is my purpose. And so my purpose on this planet, in this lifetime, is to bring forward freedom for all. And I'm doing that in two ways. The first way is through how I live my life, and as an example of what freedom can look like. And the second way is through the books that I'm writing, the company, you know, helping businesses scale and that the owners and the people inside the company can have more freedom, the work that I do with men, the work that I do with women, all my writings, workshops, this is all a way of leaving my legacy for the world so that everyone has the opportunity to experience freedom at the depth that I experience it at.
Nice. And then on the flip side, what is something that scares you?
You know, that's such a great question. You know, before prison, my greatest fear, so this is interesting. I didn't know I was going to go to prison. I was working with my spiritual mentor, and he goes, "What's your greatest fear?" And I said, "Going to prison, losing my business, losing my reputation, losing the love of my life, losing my friends." And that's in essence what I face, what I went through. Mm-hmm. So I have faced my greatest fear. And in facing my greatest fear, there's a massive amount of freedom that has come from that. Another interesting thing is when I was going through prison, fear was one of the biggest emotions that I felt. And in the past, when I felt fear, there was these personal development things that I had bought into. So whenever there was uncomfortable emotions that would come up, I would state change out of them and shift into a more powerful state to avoid feeling these uncomfortable emotions. Or I would avoid them or escape them through sex or walking, having the amazing life I had, or drinking or watching TV. I mean, there's a million different ways, playing video games or making more money. There's a million different ways to avoid feeling uncomfortable emotions. And in prison, there was no really place to turn to escape from uncomfortable emotions. And I chose to go into them. I went into the heart of all of it. And what made me feel safe to go into the heart of fear and sadness and loneliness and all these uncomfortable emotions was so deeply loving myself through the process, through this I love you practice. And so now I've built a relationship with fear where I've made friends with fear. So there's no longer an uncomfort of feeling fear. I still feel fear. I was feeling, last night I spoke on stage, I was feeling some fear, the natural fear before you go on stage that comes up. And I was like, I'm feeling fear. Yesterday, right before I went on stage, I got this message from somebody that was like, they were judging me something on my Facebook page. And I was like, that hurt. That was rejection. And that hurt. And I felt that. But as opposed to doing, I don't know what I would do, try to ignore it in the past or something, I just felt that rejection. So when you ask the question, what am I afraid of now? I want to tell you this story to even give you more context for the answer.
Okay.
So I chose to go through, there's two stories. Is that okay?
Yes.
I chose to go through prison in a nonviolent way. Now, prison's a hyper-masculine environment, and the threat of violence is always there. And so people group together by their race to feel safe, and they make up all these crazy rules called prison politics. And none of this made sense to me, because the way I saw it is, I'm a human being, you're a human being, we're both going through a difficult time, so I'm going to treat you with kindness and respect. And so I chose not to buy into the prison paradigm, but what I chose was to go through prison in the most kind and loving way, and that began with being kind and loving towards myself. And so one day I'm in the lunchroom, and I'm playing cards with this older man named Joe. And Joe's a little emotionally unstable. And I'm beating him, and every time I'm beating him, he's getting a little more upset. And finally he stands up, and he's like, "Come on, let's fight!" And in my mind, I'm like, well, this guy wants to fight me over cards? Like, this is surreal. But no, this guy really wanted to fight me. Now, a few weeks before, in my cell, I was meditating and doing this I love you practice, and the thought came to me, I was like, what would I do if somebody tried to fight me? Because I'd made the decision not to respond to violence with violence. And I've had a lot of Krav Maga martial arts training. Like, I know how to hurt somebody.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah.
And so, but I thought, the idea came to me, I was like, I wonder what would happen if I replied with, "I love you," to somebody who was trying to fight me. And so I began to visualize me replying with, "I love you." Now here's Joe in front of me saying, "Come on, let's fight." I stand up, I look him in the eyes, and I say, "I love you. I love you." And all of a sudden, like, not a weak "I love you," like an "I love you" with teeth. And all of a sudden, Joe's whole facial composure changes. He looks lost and confused, and he turns and walks away. It was very powerful. Now, I'm setting all this up to answer your question.
Okay.
Now, I had a second run-in with violence that did not turn out as well. And I had about 6 months to go, and there's this white supremacist that came onto our floor. His name was Doc. And he was 6'2", 250 pounds, part of the Aryan Brotherhood, like a real mean motherfucker, but also very intelligent. And he knew, because he'd been in the prison system long enough, he knew how to work the system and act in a way that drew people in. He was like, "Oh, I'm going to empower the whites," all this craziness. Mm-hmm. And I didn't buy into his bullshit, and I didn't fall under his influence. And one day and he hated me. He hated me because I was nice and kind to the other races. And I treated everybody the same.
Right.
And he hated me because he thought I made the whites weaker. And so one day he barges into my cell, slams the door open, comes right across me and smacks me as hard as he can across the face. I get down to a meditative type of pose. I put my hands up and I say, "I don't want to fight." He goes, "Get up." I say no. The next thing I know, he's jumping down on top of me, his hands around my throat, choking me out. I black out. And as I'm blacking out, I actually have an out-of-body experience where I see him over top of me choking me out. It was a fraction of a second. He backs away and I come to, and I see him trying to come back down on top of me to punch me. I put up my guard, but he can't get through my guard. And this whole time, so he backs away out of frustration. And this whole time inside, I'm saying, "I love you, I love you, I love you." I'm loving myself through this entire process. And then finally, my intuition says, "Say it loud enough and say it so that he can hear you." And I say, "I love you." And he gets so angry, he picks up this plastic wrap pastry treat, throws it at me and hits me. And he goes, "This isn't any fucking Buddhist meditation retreat." And I look him in the eyes. And I say, "It is for me." And this was my defining moment in prison. It was scary as hell. I didn't know how it was going to end. But I responded to violence with love. Now here's where all this is leading to. After all this happened, I was meditating on my bed and I had a download. And I had a direct experience with God. And I saw clouds billowing up. Saw light shooting up through the cloud, like a lot of way people describe a near-death experience. But this was a fraction of a second, though. And in this moment, I felt infinite power and infinite wisdom. And in this moment, I had this download. And it contained 3 essential ideas. And here's what those ideas are. The first is that life is a gift. The very fact that I'm alive is a gift. The second thing is that I cannot be destroyed. This physical body may die, but the spirit that enlivens this body cannot be destroyed. And I had that because I had that out-of-body experience. And the third thing is that I will follow my heart no matter what, even in the face of death. And so I say all of that to come back to answer your question, because I still feel fear,
Okay.
but there isn't anything that I would say that I'm afraid of.
Okay. Fair enough. Now, if we're going to kind of rewind a bit and talk about the industry that you're in now, It's very crowded. So in terms of your business, how do you rise above all the noise and distinguish yourself from the competition?
That's so funny you say that, because there's an awareness of competition. I don't actively look at the competition. I just focus on creating value, connecting with new people that I can potentially create value for, and developing the relationship. And I would say what distinguishes me from anybody else who might do some similar scaling or helping companies grow is that I start from a place of self-care and self-love. And so when I'm working with the entrepreneur, the CEO, or the executive team, and inevitably stuff comes up, personal life issues, or the business, something major happened in the business. When people have emotional stuff that comes up, it gets in the way of them taking effective action. And unless you have a way of managing that in a healthy way, you're not making the best decisions. You're not thinking the clearest way. It's taking you out of the ball game for a period of time. Or you keep driving forward in an unhealthy way, which a lot of people do. So when you are able to love yourself in a way that enables you to feel safe, to feel these emotions, you can let them pass through your body, which enables you to make the most conscious choices in every moment. So I would say that's the biggest thing that distinguishes me from anybody else who might help companies scale.
Definitely. Makes sense. Now, with your career and how it's progressed, the ups and the downs, I am sure you've acquired plenty of critics, or haters as we call them. How do you handle your critics?
This is something I'm still working on.
Okay.
Because I tell you, man, I'm a sensitive guy. I am a sensitive guy. And, when somebody says something, it hurt. Like, I feel it. I'm like, I cringe. I'm like, oh, I was just sharing this. And so that I will tell you, this has held me back from stepping out more than I know that I can, because of a fear of being criticized. Because I got some crazy ideas. Maybe not crazy. Some people think they're crazy. I have some out of the box ideas for sure. Not just around love and action, but like in a lot of other areas of life and how I live life, because I feel that gives me the greatest amount of freedom. And so as I'm sharing these ideas, which I think will give people massive amounts of freedom, there's haters, because a lot of people like their prison.
Yes.
They don't realize they're in prison, but they're comfortable. Yeah. And when somebody challenges, I'll give you an idea, because I know other people listening to this right now, it's going to trigger you. When I say, hey, there's other ways to be other than monogamous, especially women, most men are like, yeah, hey, I'm listening. Women are like, no. They don't like that. And so when I post things about topics like that, I do get negative responses. And so for me, this is my journey that I'm actively working on right now, is how do I, in a way, respond to somebody where I'm not being defensive,
got it,
where I'm not acting shut down or hurt, but I can respond in a way that helps somebody see a greater perspective, and with kind and lovingness. And so this is something I'm actively, like that guy that sent me that message last night, like, I haven't responded to him because I'm like, how do I respond in a way? Like, so this is a very poignant, relevant thing I'm working through right now.
Fair enough. Now, when you were growing up, who was the most influential person for you?
There was a guy, I did network marketing, and I got into that when I was around 17, 18. And there was a guy who was a leader in my group, and his name was Bo Short. And he so inspired me in terms of leadership and freedom and following your heart. He, I think, was probably one of the biggest people early on that made the greatest difference in terms of how I started at that critical age.
And what were some of the most valuable lessons that he taught you?
Follow your heart, determination, passion, bringing your passion forward. And I just remember him speaking on stage and just speaking so from the heart. And I was just like, fuck, like that's incredible. That's good stuff. The hairs on your arm stand up.
Goosebumps.
Yeah.
Cool. What do you find easy to do that your friends find hard to do?
Organization.
Tell us about that.
I love organizing. I would say I'm great at organizing information. I'm organizing other thoughts. I'm great at organizing physical things, organizing businesses, organizing messes, like anything that needs some structure, like I can structure, right? So organization, that leads to structure, that leads to process, that leads to systems. That's why I've done so well in business, and why I actually work great with creative entrepreneurs.
Okay.
Because creative entrepreneurs, they're like, oh, I'm creating. They need somebody like me to help them structure. Like I got running 3 companies right now, and they're not taking off as good as I know they can be. It's like, okay, well, you need to put this process and this system and hire this person and do that. Like I can see it all, and I just love that organization.
Nice. Now, when you were 21, were you still living in the D.C. area?
I was. So I lived in Maryland, in the same city for 26 years.
Okay.
And because I bought my first house when I was 19, a mile away from where I grew up.
Right.
And so by the age of 26, I was like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And so I moved to D.C., lived there in D.C. for 2 years. 26 to 28, partied a lot.
All right.
I probably went out every night. It was awesome. And then it wasn't. And then from at 28, then I moved to Denver.
Okay. So we're going to go back to talk to 21-year-old Chris. So you're still in Maryland this time. We're going to give 21-year-old Chris advice based on what you know now.
Yeah.
What advice would you give your 21-year-old self?
Yeah. And I would say not only is this the advice that I would give my 21-year-old self, 20-year-old self, this is, if there was anything that I was remembered for, any of you that are listening to me, this is it, because it's the same advice that I would give my 20-year-old self. And that is to treat yourself kind and loving. Treat yourself in a kind and loving way. And the way to do that is to say the words, I love you, to your own inner child. Don't look in the mirror. It's not I love myself. It's I love you. And that's that little boy that's inside, that all that he wants is just to be loved and acknowledged. So Chris, take a moment right now to feel inside of that part of yourself, that little boy, that 5-year-old little boy inside, your inner child, and say, I love you. And I want you to remember this for the rest of your life, and I want you to do this on a consistent basis, because if you do this, you will have your wildest dreams. You will have everything that you desire, and it will come to you in the most miraculous and magical ways, and you will do it from such a place of peace and feelings already fulfilled and satisfied.
Well done. Now for the next question, I have an idea what your answer might be, but I still need to ask it. What is the one lesson in life that took you the longest to learn?
Surrender. Letting go. It's fucking hard, but it's worth it. It's so worth it. So worth it.
All right. That was different than what I thought, but still good. Still good. Every great person has a sentence. What is your sentence? For example, my sentence would be, I love to help people unlock their creativity by teaching them how to DJ. What is your sentence?
Well, from a business sense, I help companies scale, starting from a place of self-care and self-love.
All right. Now, what is one new habit you've added to your daily routine in the past year or so that has been most beneficial?
Man, this is a good one. So 15 years I was working on this habit. And that was being consistent at what I was eating. Because I've always worked out with a trainer. And having a great body has always been important to me. But what's held me back from having the body that I really want has been emotional eating. Emotional eating has been one hell of a habit to overcome. Because whenever I was feeling like, especially like rejection from women, like emotional eating was like my go-to, a way of kind of feeling better. It could also have been stuff in business not working out, but typically it was rejection from women. And I would emotionally eat. And so I've had this awareness for 10 years, 15 years. I've been working on this. But finally, I was just like, I have just got to put it into this. This was before I turned 40. So I turned 40 this October 12th, 2018.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, I have got to overcome this before I turn 40 because I'm not going to enter into the second phase of my life with this habit. And so I had a nutritional coach that I was working with, and I did all these other little things to help finally break this habit. But I would say, so the habit that I have changed is around emotional eating. And now I no longer feel trapped or imprisoned. Like it was another form of prison, emotional eating, and now I feel free and finally in a place where I feel actually in control to get to where I actually want to be physically.
Well done. Now, we're really big readers, voracious readers here on the Amani Experience podcast. If there is 1, 2, or 3 books you feel people should stop what they're doing right now and start to read them right away, what books would you recommend?
Yeah. My number one book, I'd have to say, is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yes.
Another really powerful book in terms of the business world is called A Slight Edge. So that was really powerful about just the daily habits that you do, and how each day can add up to a lot. And I would say the third, for those of you that are interested in learning more about this, a practical love approach to life, I would say is from my mentor, Matt Kahn, which is Whatever Arises, Love That. And soon, which will be on the list, which is my book and my whole story. You're getting bits and pieces of the story here, which is How I Found Freedom Through 19 Months of Federal Prison, which will be out next year.
All right. Now, you a baseball fan?
Not really.
Not really? What are some of your favorite sports?
So I, in high school, I loved playing baseball, football, wrestling, soccer. Played a lot of sports in high school. I don't really watch a lot of sports on TV.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to pretend you're at the baseball game. They're going to announce you're coming up to bat.
Yeah.
What song is playing?
All I Do Is Win.
All I do is win, 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 no matter what. Got money on my mind, I can never get enough. And every time I step up in the building, everybody hands go up. And they stay there, and they say yeah, and they stay there.
DJ Khaled.
That's right.
And another one. Okay.
So is that a common one?
Yeah, no. That's let me think. The first time anyone's answered that one. So no, that's good. But I know the song as being a DJ. So yeah. What? Tell the people how they can find you on social media, your website, all that information.
Yep. So you can connect with me on Instagram. It's at ChrisWise24. Actually, I have a gift for people, and this is not only a way that you can connect with me. It'll have all my contact information. It will also give you, the gift I want to give you is this I Love You practice. It is the most powerful practice that I've ever learned. It's what made my prison experience so transformational, enabled me to step in to really be able to surrender, help me feel through a lifetime of unfelt emotion. And if you go to chriswise.com/love, you can you put in your name and your email, and I will send you this. It's an 8-minute video on this I Love You practice.
Good. All right.
And I'll have my contact information, and then we can stay connected.
Perfect. Thank you for the gift. We love presents.
Yeah.
So before I ask the final question, I just want to say thank you very much for spending time on our show. It's been a pleasure. I really respect the journey you've gone through and are continuing to go through. So thanks for your vulnerability. I appreciate it. And then we let our guests kind of take us home with any last-minute words of wisdom or advice. So I'll say thank you again and take us home.
Yeah. Again, I just can't. So I would say, going back to this I love you practice, because it has given me so much internal freedom. Life plays out for everybody differently. And there's challenges and difficulties that come up along the way. And all of those, for all of you, there's an opportunity that is inside of every upset, difficulty thing. And when you're able to fully surrender into what is and no longer fight against that which you don't like, it creates the greatest opportunity for growth and change. And what has enabled me to embrace life's most difficult challenges that has given me and created a level of freedom for me that I could have never even imagined was possible was this I love you practice. So if there's anything I would say, get this video, watch this video, and do this practice on the daily.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Amani Experience podcast. You can check out the show notes on amaniexperience.com/podcast. Feel free to email us at podcast@amaniexperience.com. Please remember to leave us a review on the platform you are listening on and share this podcast with anyone you feel would benefit from listening. See you soon for our next episode.